Good morning, Dan and Amy. Amy's out today. She's a little under the weather, so I'm manning the fort. I have the con. And yesterday, Devin Nunes, House Intel Committee Chairman, who is the subject of catcalling by Congressman Adam Schiff. He is the Democrat representative from Area 51, I believe. And Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, all calling on Nunes to step down because of what they term dubious conduct, bizarre pronouncements. Vox.com headline today, Rep. Devin Nunes sure seems like the wrong person to lead the Trump-Russia probe. Well, Nunes is responding. He was on with Bill O'Reilly last night and had this to say about the source of the controversy at Barr currently, which is his meeting on the grounds of the White House where he was given information about surveillance of Trump associates during the transition.
Yeah, so look, we go to the executive branch at least once or twice a week. This is not unusual because there are intelligence products that we don't have access to in the House of Representatives, but we do have the clearances to see them. So we've known about this long before Trump actually sent his famous tweet out about the wiretapping at Trump Tower. We've known that there was additional unmasking of Americans' names. We had sources that had provided us that information. And so what I had to do is I needed a place that I could actually go and find this information and review it.
And see it.
And so we just facilitated it.
So you went to the old executive office building. My guess, I know you're not saying, my guess, okay, and you looked at it, but they didn't give it to you. You just saw it. And then you went over to the president and told him what you saw. Yeah,
the next day. So there was no sneaking around. I walked onto the ground, said hi to people. Did not go to the West Wing, did not talk to the president. And then what I reviewed, and when I found out that it had nothing to do with Russia, okay, that's the key here, is that nothing to do with Russia.
It's another surveillance deal that we the people need to know about.
Did Devin Nunes do anything improper? For expert analysis on this topic, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend, Colonel Ralph Peters, retired U.S. Army officer, former enlisted man, columnist, author, and strategic analyst for Fox News Channel. Colonel Peters, thanks for joining us again.
Great to speak with you, Dan. I hope Amy feels better soon.
I'll give her your regards, and I'm sure she's listening intently in between, visiting the bathroom. And here's the question.
She's actually just hung over.
Well, she is an Iowa grad, so I'll let you do the math. So here's the question. Anything Devin Nunes did or has said in describing what he did trouble you?
I think Devin Nunes' behavior has been a disgrace.
Really?
There's no explaining. He's like a little brat who is caught doing something bad, and he's making up a different story. I mean, he's given us at least a half dozen different explanations for this stunt he pulled in the White House and running to the press before he briefed his colleagues on the committee. But above all, he has no sense of irony. Here's Devin Nunes, who has spent weeks, highlighted by last week's hearing, saying leaks are terrible. We got to get to the bottom of the leaks. It's not about Russia. It's about the leaks. And then he leaks information to the press. I mean, come on. This issue of the Trump administration and Russia cannot be a partisan issue. It can't be a Republican or a Democrat.
But is that possible? Is that possible, though? Is it possible to not be a partisan issue?
It is possible if they appoint a special prosecutor or certainly a special outside committee to look into it. And right now, and also, though, to be fair, the Senate are the big boys. The Senate are the adults. They're being quiet. They're going forward in what appears to be a bipartisan manner. The House is the chamber that really reflects America in that you've got some great people in it, you've got some absolute nutcases, and most people are somewhere in between. It reflects society. I mean, there are so many people in the House who could never get elected to the Senate, but and then gerrymandering plays into it. But seriously, the issue, I know everybody wants to get away from it, but the question of whether at any level there was collusion between President Trump or any members of his team and Russia in regard to his elections, this is a strategic question of the first importance. And if the situation were reversed, And a Democratic administration had all these contacts with Putin's people. My God, Republicans would be howling. And so what bothers me as an American citizen first, not a Republican or Democrat, but an American first, is that this was an assault, a fundamental assault on the foundation of our democracy, our election system, and we're turning it into a partisan issue. Whether you support President Trump or not, you have to put loyalty to our United States of America and our system of government above any political considerations, and nobody, including a president, is above the law. So, and more and more keeps coming out. I mean, I was ashamed of Mike Flynn, who I've known since 1985, and some of the things he's done. But you have so many people who are on the Trump team who were in contacts, going back to 2005, contacts with Putin's people, his agents. Now you have Jared Kushner meeting, it looks like at least 3 times, with a Russian banker whose bank is on our sanctions list. I mean, there's obviously, look, I'm a former Russia analyst. I speak Russian. I've dealt with the former KGB guys in Moscow, just right across the table in the back streets of Moscow. And I will tell you that this is a very serious thing. The Russians are very good, and we must get to the bottom of it. Now, maybe at the bottom of it, there's nothing. But let's do an honest, bipartisan investigation to find out so that we can be sure, we Americans, right, left, and center, can be sure that the Russians have not been able to significantly affect our election system.
Well,
because they're good and they're trying.
Well, a couple of things. One is I think your description of the House has replaced my favorite description of Congress, which was previously held by Dennis Miller, who characterized Congress as a bunch of mediocre intellects Earl Scheibed into looking somewhat consequential. So congratulations for that. But on the issue of getting to the bottom of this and it not being political, I was struck by Jim Comey's testimony last week in particular. Not so much Rogers, but Comey, as including a lot of political observations. And if you have an FBI director who is behaving like a Fox News political analyst before the House Intel Committee, combined with the knowledge that it's been since July that this investigation has been open, and the allegations continue to swirl, but no evidence is presented. In terms of the American people, don't we have kind of our version of a right to a speedy trial? Don't we have isn't there some obligation to get to the bottom of this with all due speed and present the evidence, and maybe even present some of the evidence as you go to bring the people along with something that is this intricate and has extended for as long as it has?
Well, in the course of my long and often very strange career, I've also worked with the FBI, and I will tell you, they're different. They are methodical. They're nonpartisan. At least I'm talking about the rank and file agents and people who actually do the work. And their investigations often take years. Now, Jim Comey, whatever you think of him, he didn't, it wasn't his choice to go to the Hill. They wanted him to go, and so he went. But the FBI works quietly. They do not compromise evidence. They do not leak information. The FBI, it's made of human beings, so it's not perfect by definition, but they're pretty good. And I think the dragging Comey up to the Hill right now is a mistake, because I absolutely believe the American people need to know what the truth of all this is. But sometimes in an investigation, the best thing to do is go about it quietly and interview people behind closed doors.
But on
your case.
Well, on that point, then, what do you make of Comey and Rogers refusing to meet with the House Intel Committee for a closed door session?
Well, as near as I can tell, Devin Nunes canceled that closed door session.
Okay. Well, he was asked about it yesterday, and he essentially suggested that they were unwilling to join him. But okay,
we cannot trust anything Representative Nunes says. I mean, I don't care if he's a Republican or a Democrat. This guy is just behaving crazily. I mean, he's behaving as though he's not thinking. He's just blundering forward and discrediting his committee.
What should he be doing that he's not doing, or not doing that he is doing?
Well, at this point, so far, he needs to recuse himself. If I were Paul Ryan, I'd relieve him from being the committee chair. There are all sorts of course, machinations and political considerations, but Nunes has lost even the faintest appearance of the ability to be bipartisan. Now, that doesn't mean the Democrats are all innocent in this, but they're not the ones doing crazy stuff.
Well,
they're just sitting back and watching Nunes do crazy stuff, and they're getting a lot of political capital out of it.
Well, but there is a lot of blurring of the lines of important issues here, too, such as the unmasking issue and the questions about should the communications of Trump associates, all of whom are U.S. citizens, have been intercepted in the first place. Aren't those legitimate questions for inquiry, too?
We can't even trust what Nunes says about that, because he says, oh, they're unmasking names. Okay, but who? I mean, when you're doing an espionage or subversion investigation about what's happening in America, that you're listening to foreign agents, but they are talking to Americans. And if names weren't blotted out in the text, and I've been an intelligence officer, I tell you, we're very strict about protecting American identities. But I would suggest to you that if some names weren't blotted out, it is because they are part of the investigation and there is incriminating evidence against them. But Nunes can't just make all these wild claims, and he's changed his story even about what was in those documents that he says he had to go over to the West Wing or to the old executive office building to read. It's changed several times, and to me, this just looks like he's a pathetic, ambitious little guy trying to suck up to the president. I mean, that's my take on Nunes.
But before we let you go, since you are a Russian analyst, I wanted to get your take on the rather large demonstrations that erupted across Russia this past Sunday. So Putin has his own problems back there in the motherland, and I wonder what you think those demonstrations indicate, if anything important.
What those demonstrations in Russia on Sunday indicated was tremendous courage. Tremendous, because Putin kills his rivals. He's killed Boris Nemtsov. He just, within the last 2 weeks, had one of his defectors assassinated in Kiev, Ukraine. He's killed people in London. He's attacked people in the United States. He murders people who oppose him. And yet, across Russia, in dozens of cities, large and small, you had tens of thousands, if not a total of hundreds of thousands of people coming out and demonstrating against the corruption of the Putin regime. In Moscow, the police said it was 7,000 or 8,000. It was probably about 30,000 people. You know how the Russian cops are going to play it down.
Right.
Over 1,000 people were arrested. It's including Alexei Navalny, the current leader of the opposition, and in Russia, bad things happen when you protest the government, and yet all of these people came out. Now, to be careful, the demonstrations do not mean that Putin's rule is immediately threatened. Absolutely not. He's got a grip on the security services. He's got the money. He's got the power. But it does suggest that his popularity has been dropping as a result of the Russian economy is in terrible shape. When I hear people say, "Oh, sanctions don't work," sanctions in Russia, in conjunction with falling energy prices, have worked amazingly well. Russia's poverty rate has doubled over the last 3 years.
Right.
Pensions, the real value of pensions has dropped. Putin now has to cut back on his military spending. He has this dream of building a new superpower military. Medicines have been in short supply. How do I know that? Because for months the the media have been writing stories that there's no shortage of medicine, and that tells you there's a shortage of medicine.
Right.
I mean, so many things. So Putin's not immediately threatened.
And yes,
but for the first time, he's worried.
Yeah,
he's worried now.
His revanchism is a cover for a lot of that. And as you mentioned, the Secretary of Defenestration is a cabinet-level position in the Putin regime. I can see the point. He is Colonel Ralph Peters, strategic analyst for Fox News Channel, retired U.S. Army officer. Colonel Peters, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line.